Between brunch, photo shoots, and throwing wine glasses, Jen Shah is known as one of the most controversial figures from the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. Unlike many of the housewives who are married to wealthy husbands, Jen made millions through several of her successful businesses. She had her own fashion designer, a ski chalet, and traveled by Porsche or private jet. Per Jen's Bravo contract, the TV crew was allowed to access anything while filming to catch every last detail of her life, and yet, the cameras failed to capture the ugly truth behind the glamour.
A real housewife of Salt Lake City, who's also the wife of a University of Utah football coach, is now facing federal charges along with her assistant on suspicion of running a nationwide telemarketing fraud and money laundering scheme.
Behind the flashy lights, sequins, and borrowed diamonds was a giant scam Jen Shah used to fund her lifestyle of luxury. This is the story of a real housewife and her $9 million scandal. Being of Tongan and Hawaiian descent, Jen Shah had a difficult time growing up in the predominantly white city of Salt Lake City, Utah. Jen, who was raised Mormon, studied at the University of Utah where she met a man named Sharif. The two fell in love and married in 1994 and eventually had two sons named Sharif Jr. and Omar. 5 years into their marriage, Jen asked Sharif why he wouldn't convert to Mormonism. He refused, stating the fact that the Mormon Church didn't accept Black people until 1978. Prior to that time, a phrase from the Book of Mormon stated that members, quote, shall be a white and delightsome people. After the reversal, the word white was changed to pure. Upon learning this for the first time, Jen decided to leave Mormonism behind and converted to her husband's faith of Islam. After college, Jen was motivated and ready to make a name for herself. She worked long hours in the call center and telemarketing center, where it was a dog-eat-dog world as she climbed the ranks and eventually became Director of Business Development for a Provo, Utah-based telemarketing company called Prosper, Inc. Ironically, Prosper describes itself as one of the most trusted names in one-to-one personalized education, yet a former employee named Chad Hudgens sued the motivational coaching firm in 2008 over an extreme team-building exercise. That team-building exercise was gang waterboarding. According to the complaint, a manager at Prosper forced employees to go through a Guantanamo Bay-style experience because he said he wanted them to work as hard at selling as the waterboarded employee did at breathing. While Jen Shah has not been connected to the incident in any way, it gives one a picture of the type of environment she was in. After leaving Prosper in 2011, Jen became an executive at another telemarketing company called Thrive Learning. Jen has called herself a nerd at heart and said she enjoys working with numbers, data, spreadsheets, and what she described as all the other stuff everyone else finds boring. Marketing was Jen's specialty, and she focused on things such as infomercials, direct mailing, and print campaigns before moving on to direct response marketing online. In the following years, Jen founded several businesses, including a couture dress line called JXA Fashion, a monthly subscription eyelash line known as Shah Lashes, and a skincare brand called Shah Beauty, as well as 3 marketing companies. As the CEO of these businesses, Jen managed to amass an estimated net worth of $3 million. On the surface, it appeared as if everything Jen touched turned to gold. Or was it gold plating? Combining her $3 million net worth with her husband's $500,000 annual salary as a football coach at the University of Utah, Jen Shah began to set her sights on becoming a real housewife of Salt Lake City. Each cast member of the Bravo show goes through an audition with on-camera interviews before an in-home test shoot to see if their typical day is Bravo housewife worthy. The producers also want to meet the husbands, children, and friends. By this time, Jen had rented out a $3.9 million ski chalet, something she led producers and viewers to believe she owned, and called it the Shah Ski Chalet, a 9,420 square foot home owned by a Texas-based real estate company. On the outside, Jen Shah's extravagant lifestyle, over-the-top personality, and sharp tongue, in addition to her family and friendship dynamics, secured her the coveted place in the Bravo program. When the first season of The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City premiered in November 2020, the viewers were introduced to Jen Shah, a successful businesswoman living in opulence with her beautiful family, always surrounded by numerous assistants. And Jen came out swinging, making sure everyone knew she had money to blow, when, in the beginning of the show, Jen spent $85,000 on a birthday party for fellow cast member Meredith Marks. While the $1 million ski chalet and Jen's aura of having it all together as a successful businesswoman were what the audience saw, behind the curtain and the flashy lights, Jen's empire of deceit was beginning to crumble. On the show, Jen bragged about spending around $50,000 a month to sustain her lifestyle, a lifestyle that included designer clothes, luxury cars, lavish parties in her rental home, and the use of private jets, 20 bags of luggage for a single trip, and everything else grandiose. Although Jen was very open about how she spent her money during the first season of The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, she didn't explain where that money came from. When Jen later described her business, many still didn't understand how she made her fortune.
People are wondering, how'd you get so rich?
My background is in direct response marketing for about 20 years. So our company does, advertising. We have a platform that helps people acquire customers. So when you're shopping online or on the internet and something pops, we have the algorithm behind why you're getting served that ad.
It wasn't just the viewers who were puzzled about how Jen could afford her lavish lifestyle. Even her co-stars and Andy Cohen himself were confused, as calculations of Jen Shah's income and expenditures didn't add up. In her casting tape, Sharrieff hinted that things were a bit out of control, saying, quote, "My wife's shopping habits can be in and of themselves a daily source of my drama," end quote. But Jen's spending habits are not the only reason she has often been at the center of the narrative of the show. Jen has been seen throwing insults and glasses at parties and having prolonged conflicts with other cast members. Jen has also opened up about her father's death, which, in addition to Sharrieff's job-related absences at home, led to depression. Eventually, Jen's condition worsened so drastically that she claimed to have hit rock bottom. At the time, Jen was lashing out at everyone around her, including her husband, which almost cost her their marriage of 26 years. In the Season 2 premiere, Jen explained what happened by saying, quote, "I thought that my entire world was ending. 6 months ago, Sharrieff and I almost got a divorce. I thought my life was over. Sharrieff felt like he wasn't being a positive influence in my life, like he couldn't help me. What I didn't realize was how I was acting, and because I hadn't fully told him how I was feeling, it made him feel like he was the problem. And so he was like, okay, I have to leave. And at first I thought, okay, this is just an argument. And the next day, a divorce attorney contacted me. He had already reached out to a divorce attorney," end quote. But after somewhat of a family intervention, and the couple's son, Sharrieff Jr., telling his mother he supported her going on medication, Jen decided to fight for her marriage. She confronted what was killing her inside, and as Sharrieff agreed to start couples therapy, things began to get better. But it was around this time that cracks in the facade known as Jen Shah's luxurious life began to show. On February 12th of 2020, The Real Housewives of Dallas star Brandi Redmond and Stephanie Hallman hosted an episode of Weekly Dose of BS. During the show, Brandi teased the viewers by saying she knew someone from The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City who was renting their home. Brandi explained that she didn't know the exact cast member, but because they were renting her friend's home, she knew this was true. Shortly after, it became clear Brandi had been talking about Jen Shah, as Jen commented on a now-deleted Instagram post saying, quote, "Is this what everyone is getting their G-string up their ass about because they're irrelevant? Or is it because they wish they could afford to pay their rent, plus own 4 other homes and have an apartment in NYC?" End quote. Jen wasn't just confirming her family was renting the 9,420 square foot 5-bedroom, 6-bathroom mansion, but also claimed she owned 4 other properties and an apartment in New York City. Now, most people would be grateful to just have a place to live. But in the Real Housewives universe, not owning your luxury estate is one of the most shameful things one can do. However, when the media looked into Jen's claims, they found no proof of ownership in New York. Renting houses, cars, luxury bags, and other items is nothing new in the celebrity world. But viewers had a problem with Jen implying the things they saw on screen as being owned by her. If this was Jen's only problem, she could have counted her blessings and this video wouldn't have been made. But no, Jen had much bigger problems coming, as a federal investigation had been brewing for quite some time. Jen's former employee, clothing designer Koa Johnson, who worked for the Real Housewives star for 10 months, alleged that almost everything she had was borrowed or loaned, including Jen's fur coats, jewelry, and Porsche. Furthermore, Koa said that his time with Jen left him traumatized. He was under constant stress, wasn't sleeping, and wasn't able to take care of himself physically and mentally due to Jen's high demands. In March of 2021, an audio clip was leaked to the internet, which allegedly demonstrated how Jen verbally abused her former employee. At the beginning of the clip, Jen can allegedly be heard swearing at Koa over an outfit delay, but that delay was caused because Jen hadn't transferred money over to a credit card for the fabric to be purchased. The process was delayed so much that in the end, Koa had only 17 to 20 hours left to make the 2-piece suit for his employer. Still, on the tape, Koa is heard apologizing, but Jen continues to swear and says she just won't wear her fashion line for that event and will find something else.
Stop here, and that's it. And you can stop fucking smiling, bitch, and being a fucking bitch. Because you are. Yeah, you are. And Koa, handle this shit.
Okay,
No, not let. You fucking handle it.
Okay.
Fucking don't have a fucking attitude with me. I'm fucking going to reunion this week. Shut the fuck up! Okay.
Koa eventually left his job as Jen's clothing designer in January of 2021. By then, the Real Housewives star had allegedly failed to pay Koa for his work for several months, since September of 2020. But while Jen didn't seem to appreciate all her workers, there was someone she treated very differently, a man named Stuart Smith. Jen and Stuart's friendship started a decade ago while working for the same company. During that time, Jen saw something in Stuart that others didn't, and she even saved his job 5 or 6 times over several years. Stuart was an underdog in his department, and whenever changes were made or he got in trouble in some way, the company planned to get rid of him. But each time, Jen spoke with the bosses, and Stuart got to keep his job. Jen believed Stuart was a hard worker, always going the extra mile. She believed he just needed a chance, and that is how their friendship began. When the time came for Jen to focus on her own business, she hired Stuart as her assistant. The two became extremely close. As Jen explained, quote, "He literally knew more than my husband knew as far as like, you should get her this for her birthday, or Jen likes these tampons, not those tampons. He was more of a personal assistant to me than like so-called business," end quote. From an outside perspective, Jen Shah and Stuart Smith were the dream team. He made several appearances on Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, driving Jen's Porsche, helping her plan parties, and debating lunch choices. But Jen and Stuart often communicated through encrypted messages, not just for security, but because there was a lot these two were doing that couldn't happen in front of the cameras. Suddenly, on March 30th of 2021, not long after production began on Season 2 of The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, task force agents that target financial crimes showed up while the women were waiting on a private bus. But for a moment, Jen was one step ahead of the task force agents. While waiting on the bus before they arrived, Jen received a mysterious phone call and looked as if she had seen a ghost. In a hurry, she asked one of her castmates to remove her mic pack and, not wanting to be arrested on camera, fled the scene. Task force agents arrived, thinking this would be their big break, but no one was able to locate Jen. until agents found her later that same day and Jen Shah was taken into custody. A judge called her a flight risk and set her bail at $1 million. Jen Shah and her assistant Stuart Smith were accused of running a nationwide telemarketing fraud scheme for nearly 10 years, almost their entire friendship. Following Jen and Stuart's arrests, Manhattan U.S. Attorney Audrey Strauss gave a statement saying, quote, "Jennifer Shah, who portrays herself as a wealthy and successful businessperson on reality television, and Stuart Smith, who is portrayed as Shah's first assistant, allegedly generated and sold lead lists of innocent individuals for other members of their scheme to repeatedly scam. In actual reality, and as alleged, the so-called business opportunities pushed on the victims by Shah, Smith, and their co-conspirators were just fraudulent schemes motivated by greed to steal victims' money. Now, these defendants face time in prison for their alleged crimes." End quote. According to court documents, Jen and Stuart began their telemarketing scheme back in 2012. Their ideal targets were vulnerable individuals, usually over 55 years of age, to whom they could sell so-called business services. The victim often saw an ad on social media about an opportunity to work from home, and then made a small investment to create an online business with other participants in the scheme. The victim's information was then added to a lead list, which Jen and Stuart provided to a company. In this case, it was Thrive Learning and later a company called Guidance that then sold the leads to telemarketers on sales floors. Jen eventually moved some of these sales floors to Kosovo to avoid law enforcement and regulatory scrutiny. Next, the telemarketers contacted the victims on these lead lists, offering them Thrive or Guidance coaching sessions. During these sessions, the victims were sold more useless business services that didn't even exist. In the final step of the scheme, the leads were further sold to what's called biz-op telemarketers, who offered related services that the Thrive or Guidance coaches told the victims to buy. This way, one person is targeted by multiple different telemarketing scammers, and it's unfortunately very easy for the victims to find themselves deep in debt by the time they realize what's happened. The most potential victims of this kind of scam are retirees, the disabled, and people with limited income who could benefit from earning more money. During the pandemic, with little safety nets in place for most Americans who didn't live in a ski chalet, many were interested in the opportunity to work from home, including Marie Walker, a 67-year-old teacher from Atlanta who was one of these people. According to Marie, as soon as she entered her information in an online ad that promised to help her work from home, her phone began to ring nonstop. An endless amount of different companies tried to sell their products and services to her, including one called Mastery Pro. Marie explained what happened when she agreed to purchase a package from the company, saying, quote, "From Mastery Pro, I did purchase a social media package, but I would need to send in $1,000 from my bank for a social media boost package. In January of 2021, I started having a lot of problems with the website. I was trying to reach the marketing, the coaching, the website builders, and I just couldn't reach anybody. There was no website, nothing. My head was really spinning. I said, oh, this is just a scam. I contacted all my credit card companies, my banks, I contacted the police departments, made reports, I contacted the FTC. I put in a total of about $18,000. I did get some back on my credit cards, around $8,000, but the rest is lost." End quote. Altogether, Jen Shah and her co-conspirators defrauded victims of an estimated $9 million. Since Jen's and Stuart's arrest, there have been speculation about who tipped off the authorities about where they would be. Jen herself has blamed fellow housewife Meredith Marks, who was acting oddly unbothered after hearing the news. Meredith has since said she had nothing to do with Jen's arrest. The more likely scenario is that one of the 10 alleged participants in the telemarketing scheme who were charged back in 2019 simply named Jen Shah and Stuart Smith to federal investigators. According to Homeland Security Investigation's El Dorado Task Force, the investigation itself began from an unlikely source, a narcotics arrest in New Jersey. That operation led authorities to first indict several telemarketers in 2017, and this created a domino effect, as that case was followed by another indictment, USA v. Chidi, in November of 2019. And that is the case that involves Jen Shah and Stuart Smith. At first, Jen and Stuart both maintained their innocence. During the April 2021 arraignment, Jen and Stuart pleaded not guilty to conspiracy to commit wire fraud in connection with telemarketing and conspiracy to commit money laundering. Jen's mother then liquidated her retirement assets to the tune of $1 million in order to help pay for Jen's legal fees. After being released on bail, Jen gave multiple interviews swearing she had done nothing wrong.
It's important to me to fight. It's important to me, one, because I'm innocent. I'm not guilty of any of these charges that that I've been accused of. I'm innocent. I don't know why I'm going through this or my family's going through this. I don't know, but I don't question Allah. I don't question God's plan. There is a reason for this, and I just feel like I need to set an example for others that you fight your ass off for your freedom. You fight because guess what? It is very easy. It's easy for people to accuse a person of color, a female person of color here in America today. It is easy for them to accuse people, and you can look at the statistics.
Jen requested through her attorney that all charges against her be dismissed because there was no proof she, quote, joined the conspiracy willfully and with the specific intent to defraud. The motion was quickly denied, however, and the trial date was scheduled for October 18th of 2021. At this point, Jen faced a maximum sentence of 30 years for the wire fraud charges and an additional 20 years for the money laundering charges, in addition to restitution of up to $16 million. It also came to light that back in 2016, the FTC had sued 2 of the sales floors where Jen sold leads, and she was deposed during that investigation. In 2017, the company Thrive and Guidance settled with the FTC for $29 million following another lawsuit. Around the same time, Jen and Stuart began operating their own lead-generating businesses while being well aware of these lawsuits. Due to the pandemic protocols, Jen's trial was postponed until March 7th of 2022. But while Jen awaited her trial, Stuart suddenly changed his plea. During a hearing on Friday, November 19th of 2021, Stuart Smith pleaded guilty to all charges. In his written statement, Stuart said, quote, I knowingly and intentionally discussed and engaged with other individuals to develop a plan or operation to obtain money by false representation by offering and inducing individuals, many of whom were over 50 years of age or older, to provide money to entities that I and others were involved with. End quote. We don't know what made Stuart change his mind, but it's possible he hopes to benefit from his cooperation, as he is facing a maximum of 30 years in prison. Currently, Stuart remains free on bail. His sentencing was initially scheduled on March 3rd of 2022, but has been moved following the developments on Jen's side of the case. Jen's trial was later postponed again to July of 2022. All this time, Jen remained adamant that she hadn't been involved in any kind of illegal activity. On Instagram, she responded to a fan's reaction to her legal issues, saying, quote, I'm innocent and look forward to trial so you, along with everyone else, can see the truth, end quote. And of course, Jen never stopped filming The Real Housewives, but instead let the cameras roll on her legal woes. During The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City reunion specials in March of 2022, Jen was seen crying, swearing she was going to fight until the very end. Not just because she was innocent, but to represent every other person who has not been able to fight. Sharif was also there, supporting Jen, and said the dark cloud was not going anywhere until his wife would be vindicated through the trial. But to everyone's surprise, after a year of vigorously swearing her innocence, Jen Shah appeared in front of a U.S. District Judge on July 11th of 2022 for a surprise hearing during which she changed her plea. As part of her deal, Jen pleaded guilty to one count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and the U.S. attorney agreed to drop count 2, the conspiracy to commit money laundering. This means that instead of facing a 50-year sentence and $16 million in restitution, Jen now faces up to 30 years in federal prison and up to $9.5 million in restitution to her victims. She also agreed to forfeit $6.5 million of proceeds traceable to the conspiracy. It's been speculated that Stewart's decision to take a plea deal most likely pushed Jen to change her mind. Jen and Stewart were incredibly close for over a decade, and he's undoubtedly capable of sharing a lot of information with the feds about his former employer's illegal actions. The moment Stewart changed his plea, he became a witness against Jen Shah. In addition, going into trial could have meant all the other defendants, not just Stewart, would be able to testify against her. Also, in a trial, the government wouldn't have to prove anything other than that Jen agreed to do something illegal as part of the conspiracy. She didn't have to know about everything that was going on in the nationwide telemarketing scam. Even just funding the scheme would have been enough for a conviction. The main reason Jen Shah's plea change was surprising was the timing. Jen waited until the very last minute to make her decision, but Los Angeles criminal defense attorney Troy Slayton explained why this might have happened, saying, quote, "It's not unusual for the government and defendants to continue negotiating up to the start of trial and sometimes even after a trial has begun and witnesses have testified. Usually, prosecutors will make a last best final offer and give a preview of what the offer will be if they have to start trial." End quote. Choosing to avoid trial saved Jen from the possibility of facing her victims in the courtroom and making herself a public spectacle, or more of a public spectacle. After the plea change, Jen's attorney gave a statement to People saying, quote, "Ms. Shah is a good woman who crossed a line. She accepts full responsibility for her actions and deeply apologizes to all who have been harmed. Ms. Shah is also sorry for disappointing her husband, children, family, friends, and supporters. Jen pled guilty because she wants to pay her debt to society and put this ordeal behind her and her family." End quote. Jen Shah is currently awaiting her sentencing, which will take place on November 28th of 2022. Until then, she is free on bail, filming Season 3 of The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, even after the opulent lifestyle that originally got Jen onto the show has been proven to not just be fake, but fraudulent and built at the expense of vulnerable people. This has been the story of a Real Housewives $9 million scam, another story that proves not all that glitters is gold. If you are a fan of learning about scams, cults, and cautionary tales, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you'll be notified when a new documentary comes out. My name is Josie, and thank you so much for watching.